Since 1983, FAME has helped business and education work for Maine. Contact the authority, the Finance Authority of Maine.
Welcome. This is our Afterthought segment where we keep our guests around from our broadcast show for a little extra thought and hopefully some more in-depth and candid discussion of the issues and some that we didn't get to. Today with us we have Nicole Witherbee, Principal of PolicyEdge Consulting, Rosa Scarcelli, CEO of Stanford Management, and Matt Jacobson, CEO of Maine Co. You may have heard a couple of them. They ran for governor earlier too, so they have a lot of thoughts. They thought about a lot of these issues, which is good, And you thought about them too, right? But you didn't run for governor.
I didn't run for governor.
I thought you did. So you don't have to.
No, and you shouldn't expect me too soon.
All right. We left off with, we were talking about small business credit and that kind of the credit crunch, and we didn't get to spend as much time on that one. Let's talk more about that. Nicole, talk about how the impact of that for small businesses and how we're going to get around that.
It's in part psychological. And I say
for the
that
businesses
because
or the banks?
I would say both.
Okay.
If I'm a business and I'm worried that I'm not going to have, that I'm going to have half the clients next week that I expected to have, I'm not going to try to, grow as fast. And maybe my ideas aren't as kind of far-reaching because I'm being more conservative with my business. And so maybe that's where the idea piece plays out. If I'm one of the banks, and I'm a little bit nervous that I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like when financial reform plays out. I'm not exactly sure what the economy is going to look like next month. Then I'm going to be much more conservative with my lending. And in fact, we've asked banks to be more conservative with their lending. So
yeah, please don't do that again to us, right?
Yeah. So now we have the issue of matching our needs and the financial piece. And I do think that there are, the credit unions and the small banks are lending. They still want to lend. They're increasing the amounts. And so, people just need to utilize that more. And
the unfortunate thing is that there's still a cap on the credit unions in terms of the amount that they can lend to small business.
That should be?
I absolutely think that on a federal level we need to increase the cap because community banks, credit unions are very connected with the people they're lending to, and there's a relationship banking there that can ease that stress and that nervousness because there is that, we know who I'm lending to and they know who's lending to us.
I don't disagree with that to the extent that they have the same regulations and the same hurdles that banks have. Then fine, let credit unions do it. But if you're going to impose a higher standard of regulation on the bank and then let the credit union with a lower standard do the same things, I'm not sure that's
And the lower standard is in the being able to back their assets.
Absolutely.
Qualifies.
In the qualifies. But again, I think Nicole said something that I think is really, really profound around that notion of uncertainty.
get used to that. I'm very profound.
I know you are. I know you are. It's not the first time I've said that. But it's all around the that uncertainty.
That'll be the soundbite.
And we have exactly. That's the commercial.
Yeah.
We have generated a ton of uncertainty in government over the last 6, 8, 10 months around what's going to happen with name the issue, healthcare, energy, financial services. That uncertainty does drive people back into their hole, so they don't make the kind of investment decisions that they might in a more robust economy. So I think that's psychological.
But don't forget, though, I would just say this is more about a cultural shift that's happening, not too dissimilar from what happened after the Depression. That there is going to be
just look at
a long
the personal
tail.
saving rates too.
Yeah,
the personal saving rates going up.
People are getting out of debt.
And these are good things to a certain extent.
To an extent, but in order to unfasten this credit crunch, as we say, to me it's about good ideas and it's about bankable loans.
Talk about the venture capital that's looking for ideas out
there. A little bit
sitting
different. You know, and we talk about 3 different kinds of businesses. There's the kind you attract, there's the kind you keep here and try to grow, and then there's the kind you try to incubate. And that incubation model, we do some work at Maine Co. called the Maine Investment Exchange, where we match up ideas with early stage capital. I can still put $50 to $100 million in a room. That's not the hard part of that equation. The last 3 or 4 forums, we have put out the word, hey, scalable, venture-ready companies, and we haven't gotten the kind of response.
Is everybody having that problem? Small Business Growth Fund and others looking, they've got the money?
I think people are looking, I don't know about the Small Business Growth, but I think if you look at the quality and the investments that are out there, a lot of your big private venture firms aren't looking in Maine. And that's something I think we need to focus on.
I think they make an assumption that we're not scalable.
I don't think that's true.
I think they do.
This is just anecdotal, and I'm always.
Is that right? Is that a correct assumption?
Can you name some companies that are scalable that can't get the funding? I can't. I spend my life looking at.
What I'm saying is that we have a hard time. They rightly recognize that we have a hard time scaling here. We do.
I know I have two friends who own companies who recently were approached by venture capitalists. And that's anecdotal, but I don't think that we're in this total stagnation, and I do think that there's an issue of scale, and some of that is, you know, in large part, you talked about distance in terms of energy, but think about that in terms of businesses. Manufacturing companies didn't just close because of energy issues.
We've got to generate the momentum and the scale here, and the reality is we have to be known as an innovative society. And frankly, you know, Southern Maine is we are known as innovating, and we're starting to see that momentum. But there are venture capital firms approaching people that I know, and they expect them to move to California.
Absolutely.
It is an assumption that if they're going to invest, that they're not going to scale it here.
And is that because we need to have some different kind of factory, the idea factories? Is that the education thing?
I think it's absolutely the education thing, but you need to have an educated workforce that is actually being trained for the jobs that we have or that we will have in the future.
We need to invest in that.
There needs to be an
Well,
integration between the education system
but we
and
need
the
to
jobs.
shift, though.
We need to invest in that, but we need to couple that with businesses, so businesses and educators are talking to each other and
Absolutely.
understand
Exactly.
what we should be training for.
Why are we training people for sports marketing when we've got precision manufacturing jobs that are going wanting? I mean, that's sort of the issue.
We have to look at integration.
Just them.
Period.
Hey, why are we doing?
Yeah.
And we need to decide that we're going to be innovative, and innovation means R&D, innovation means spending, and some prioritization
But
has
how
to
do you
happen.
Let me
that?
ask one more question. Just it's a political question, but I'm not going to ask it. Not about a candidate. Don't worry. I'm going to put you
I
on
love
the
them all.
spot.
I
I told
love them
you I
all.
would put you on the spot. But the divide, the north-south divide.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys are fresh off the campaign trail. And you just said, and we all know that little triangle of Southern Maine, it's got, what, 2/3 of the people, 2/3 of the jobs, 2/3
And
of the
6%
capital.
unemployment. I mean, it's
And 6% unemployment, and most of the educated workforce is there as well, and closer to Boston, et cetera. Are we ever going to be able to focus on that and just say, that's it?
Right.
Can candidates do that? Can, you know?
Look, I think if we prioritize some assets that we have in the rest of our state, agriculture, I know something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Agriculture is a great growth opportunity for us. It's who we are.
Okay.
We have 400,000 acres of farmland that will be in transition in the next 10 years. They will either be sold or they'll go into land trusts.
That's an
And
interesting
if
thought.
we are not focused on regionalized
The jobs will come out of that?
well, there's certainly, if we're talking about the rest of the state,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, right.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what they can
and
do.
it's more about innovating. How do we integrate localized food and higher tech processing and things that are value added? Because everyone wants to know where their food's coming from. I mean, this is an opportunity for us.
And Matt, I know you always say, when you go out and talk to the different municipalities and the towns, they want, hey, man, bring us a biotech
Right.
producer up here, a pharmaceuticals company in Millinocket. And you go,
Yeah, we got to
let's
do
talk
what
about
we
what
do.
you really have.
Let's do what we do, and do what we do well. You know, the problem is probably our greatest asset is this beautiful place. What do we do to, and yet all our assets go into, we want to do manufacturing, which is fine, and we ought to do manufacturing, but what do we do to influence the kind of things that we'd like? You go back to the wind power thing. My problem is, where are the tax incentives to get the manufacturers to come here? Where's the energy plan to get the cost down so they can possibly manufacture here? You know, we used to talk about on the campaign this whole notion of connecting up tourism, that it ought to be more than just T-shirt shops, and it ought to be fixing the cruise ships, and it ought to be training the guys that work in them, it ought to be the reservation systems, it ought to be all that.
We should have an
Where's
integrative education system that addresses tourism.
But if you want to have innovation, then how come our tax policy doesn't reward venture and angel capital? You know, our seed tax credit is paltry compared to some other states.
Yeah. New
You know,
hire
those-
credits and startup credits.
Exactly. There's kinds of things where if you invest in a new company, maybe instead of a cap, you know, right now if you do that, it's $100,000. Why don't we make it $10 million? And it's tax-free. You know, those kinds of things will drive
Well,
investment
because we
here.
also have the challenge of not having enough revenue in this
But
state.
the point is, you're not getting it anyway.
Well, here's the thing that we really need to do in the state of Maine. We need an economic policy.
Other states have doubled down on incentives
it's true.
to the point where Pine Tree zones, I can't even get a conversation with this allocator anymore
Yeah.
because our incentives have deteriorated over
Right.
time.
Well, and I'm a big fan because, you know, being in the housing business with the tax credit coming along in 1986, that drove an entire industry that would not have existed otherwise. So I see that there's a direct correlation, but you can't have incentives that are so watered down and meek just so we make everyone happy. You need to just say, we're going to do these 3 things and we're going to do them well.
Yeah, I mean,
and
the
that's
point
the
is
economic
also
policy.
if you have, there is a place for tax incentives, but if they get to the point where you're bringing business in and giving them a free pass, then it didn't do us any good in the first place because we're not getting revenue out of it, and you know, maybe we get jobs out of it, but
Right.
are
And
they
I think
long-term?
that I think jobs is
equate to
important.
revenue.
Of course, jobs is
We've
important.
got 40,000 jobs that we lost in the last 15 months. We got to do something about jobs straight away.
We should.
We got to stop right there.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks.
The more
Yeah.
you keep talking, the more I have to edit out. 'Cause
Yeah, I wish you were the first time I'd ever heard that.
Thanks a lot.
You're used to that now?
This is great. I appreciate it. Love to have you back to do
Thanks.
some more of this in the
Great.
future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.